Thank you. Good morning, members, and welcome to the meeting of the Audit Risk Scrutiny Committee. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be made available for viewing through our Council's website. Can I please remind you of a few of the arrangements in the good guidance note? Microphones should be muted, excuse me, and video switched off when you are not addressing the meeting. Should you wish to contribute to any item, you should write speak in the Teams chat function and you will be invited to speak in order. The Council's standing orders will apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by a roll call. And if any members have to leave the meeting for any reason, can I remind you to either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time, or you could write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you come back. This is required to allow us to record members' presence, and please do not use the chat function for any contributions that are material to debate. We do tend to do that, so I would ask members not to do that if they can help it. So if there's any particular questions or points you want to raise, just so we're completely open, transparent, the members of the public can see it. Fiona, just before I go, your video's still on, is that because you want to come in and say a few words maybe?
No, it wasn't. I just thought I would stay on in case you wanted me to say good morning, members, and good morning, Chair, because this is the first meeting of the Audit Risk and Scrutiny Committee that I'm in attendance for. Looking forward to the meeting, Chair, and I'll now put my camera off. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Fiona, and thanks for attending as well. It's much appreciated. Thank you. So item number 1 on the report today is sending apologies and the Chair's approval of the members' remote participation. I'll do that first. So I do approve the members' remote participation. And so over to you now, Tracy, I think, for sending apologies. Thank you.
Morning, thanks, Chair. Morning, members. We've got 11 members present. Not present at the start of the meeting are Councillors Drybrough, Johnston, Ronnie and Scobie. And I have no formal apologies, Chair. Thank you.
Could I put apologies in for Archie Drybrough, please, because attending a training session today. Sorry, Tracy.
Noted, thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor McKee. So I think certainly I was trying to get in touch with Malcolm earlier. Councillor Johnston couldn't contact him, so he's maybe having connectivity problems. Spoke with Councillor Ronnie, he's certainly intending to attend today, but ultimately I think we've got a protocol in place.
Morning, I'm here.
Oh, good man, thanks Ronnie. Matthew, sorry. Councillor Ronnie. So just Councillor Johnston, so if Malcolm appears we can put him in as being present. So number 2, declarations of interest. Members, do you have any declarations of interest? Take silence as not being any. Minute of the previous meeting, the 16th of February 20. Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong one. So I've got the old chairs now. Sorry about that. When I mean 20th April 21, which is 70:10. Can we agree that as being a true reflection of what happened on that day? Councillor Campbell, is that you coming in, John?
Yeah, agreed.
Agreed. Oh, thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, that's agreed. Thank you. Councillor Young as well. Thank you. So item number 4 is external audit draft plan. Reports by the head of... Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong one again. I'll just turn this off. That's the previous one. I could only find last month's, the last meeting. Sorry about that. That's away now. I can come back to my reports. Item number 4 is the Fleece and Galloway Council's local code of governance. Code of Corporate Governance, an annual governance statement for 2021 years gone past. Reports by the Head of Governance and Assurance. My understanding, Nick, it's yourself that's talking to this. Nick, do you want to do a presentation or are you just looking for questions? It's up to you.
I'll just take you through a brief summary, Chair, if I may. So this is the annual report we get on the governance statement. To comply with SIP for guidance, we're required to show how the council has complied with the terms of the Code of Corporate Governance for the year just ended, and how we've met the SIP for Code of Practice for local authority accounting. You've got the various appendices, so you've got the SIP for guidance, you've got our assessment against our actions over the year, and you've also got the draft AGS also. So at paragraph 3.5, members will will be aware that FPT has undertaken a review of a number of issues which impact on the AGS this year, and come forward with a number of recommendations in how we can strengthen the AGS and members' ownership or buy into the compilation of the AGS for the year. Improvement actions or recommendations coming forward from FPT have included production of a 6-monthly good practice questionnaire about governance matters for completion by all senior managers, and it's included work on governance and organisational culture. And in that regard, we've seen the formation of a member officer working group to pick up matters that may need to be addressed. So, as stated at 3.11, we've picked up the review of FPT. We've also had input from the main service committees. So a report on the AGS has gone to each of the service committees for their input. The last 2 committees are due to consider those reports in the next couple of weeks. For that reason, it's not been able to finalise the input from committees at this stage. So the AGS is presented to you in draft form here, with a proposal at 2.3 for the finalisation of the statement to be undertaken by the head of governance and assurance once we've got all the feedback in from the remaining committees, so it can so we can complete the AGS and that feeds into the final accounts. That's all I've got to say, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Nick. I'll just check the chat before I see that last point. John, Councillor Young, is it beyond this point, John, is it?
It's on this item, Chair, yes, and thank you for that presentation. There's a lot of work obviously gone into this, which is very much appreciated. I felt, particularly at the bottom of page 17, some of the language was a bit, I don't know, open or ambiguous. Page 17, scoring framework 4 and 5. High number of policies are in place that contribute to the principles which are up to date and regularly referred to, and we can demonstrate strong. Well, all you're really demonstrating is you've got a large number of policies in place. You're not demonstrating that these policies are adhered to and complied with. You know, you can have any number of policies you like, but the important thing is that people follow these policies. And to be honest, I would like to see some evidence that these policies are being adhered to. And if you don't mind, can I ask for a clarification? You said that the evaluation scores were, the evaluation scores followed returns with senior managers. So who in fact assigned these particular evaluation scores of 3, 4 and 5? And how were these numbers arrived at? So two points, Nick, thanks very much.
In terms of, sorry, Vlad.
On you go, Nick. You go first, and I'll come on the back of
I
that.
was just going to offer that in terms of who's contributed, it's heads of service and service managers will have had input also. Don't know whether you were able to clarify the other point, Vlad.
Yeah, it's absolutely, I agree in terms of policies and procedures in place don't necessarily demonstrate compliance, but it does demonstrate a the principles in terms of the general framework that we have, and thereafter the compliance of those specific policies and procedures are within, obviously within each service, and thereafter each service committee to monitor and supervise. Obviously the Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee has also got a role to play within that assurance and scrutiny piece, but absolutely agree, you can have lots of perfect policies. That doesn't necessarily tell the full story, but the full story is then thereafter in governance terms scrutinised by the various services, heads of services, SLT, and also the various service committees and council. So that's the answer to that particular question. I'm hoping that hopefully answers it. And in terms of the scoring, yes, the scoring's arrived in terms of general assessment, and we come to that particular evaluation score sheet that you've seen in front of you.
Thanks, Vlad. I'm still not absolutely sure how the values of 3, 4 and 5 were arrived at. So were they arrived following a mathematical process, or were they arrived at following the assessor's opinions?
I think we arrive at that in terms of our own assessment. Liz, I see Liz is here. She might be able to provide some further context in terms of her involvement.
Yes, thank you. Through yourself, Chair. Last year was the first time that we had undertaken an evaluation on this basis, and it was done by the governance officers, and it's then consulted on with the corporate management team and other senior officers. So although the initial assessment is indeed done by the report authors and the expert governance team, if you like, there is a wider opportunity for all heads of service to contribute any thoughts that they have, any additions or amendments to not only the scores, but the narrative that sits behind the scores. So I hope that's a reassurance for you.
No, I appreciate that, Liz. Thanks very much. But it is really a subjective process then.
Yes, you're correct, it is. And I think that's why last year we were very keen to build on the work that other councils had done in terms of, because last year was the first time we had done it. So we have used best practice and the way in which other organisations do it. But that's why there's certainly that consultation process to make sure that our judgment and our assessment has got that wider confidence from the organisation.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. But Fiona, was yours? I see you put yourself down to speak. Was that in the same point?
It is, but I'm conscious through you, Chair, there's a couple of members would like to speak, so I'll maybe just come in after them. I did just want to make some remarks in relation to this process, but I'll stand back for the members just now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, Fiona. So, Councillor McKee, Jock, then it's Katie. Councillor Hadman.
Hi, thanks, Chair. I'm quite happy with what's lying out here. In looking at item A, behaving with integrity, demonstrating strong commitment to ethical values, respect and rule of law. My problem is if something happens, either with staff or with councillors, what action is taken? There's nothing to say that any action will be taken against anybody causing problems through their behaviour with integrity and strong commitment. It's just, I just wonder what's the kind of fallbacks or support there for that sort of thing happening. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Looks like Vlad's got to answer that one.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, again, on the one hand, you've got the framework in terms of the various policies and procedures that we've got in place. Those policies and procedures will determine how we handle any breaches of those. That includes whether there's any breaches of the legislation, which is mentioned there, or if there's any other breaches, such as, for example, breaches to our code of conduct in terms of employees, or code of conduct in terms of members' actions. So all of those specific governance documents will determine how they are dealt with through that particular process. So again, you've got the policies and procedures, and within that you've got how to deal with any particular breaches.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks both for that. Councillor Hagman, Katie.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. It's a huge amount of information in this report. So, I mean, we could be talking here for literally hours. So I will do my very best to not talk for hours on this. First of all, thank you. I mean, it's, as I say, it's just an enormous piece of work. And that is appreciated, something that we have to do, and it's important that we do it. I would echo the points that Councillor Young had made. We can have all the policies in the world, but we need reassurances that they're actually being implemented, etc. I'm pleased also to see on page 13 that the review of outside members' appointments to outside bodies is still in the pipeline, because that's something that's really important. I sit in a number of outside bodies, some of which I'm very, very active with, others of which I have I've got no point of reference at all with them. It's a piece of paper, and actually it's really important that we get that resolved, especially when we look forward to the new council that's going to be in place as of next year. Specific questions, looking at Appendix 2, and again, it's just a huge amount of information, but the page 42 starting, there's a table with a whole load of principles set out via SIPFA and SOLAS. And one of the striking things that jumps out at me is Principle G, which is implementing good practices in transparency, reporting and audit to deliver effective accountability. And I'm just conscious that the G table isn't got a huge amount of crosses. Now, I'll maybe see how many times I can bring this up in one committee, because I keep bringing it up. Our website is atrocious. I've had constituents contact me asking for a copy of our particular policies, copies of our strategies, and it's not on there. And I'm just wondering, if we're publishing our strategies and our policies online, would that in effect tick this box? And who is it that has decided and what framework that we are doing these things? Because I'm looking at, say, on page 43, our fair trade commitment. We've not ticked any of those boxes. So what are we doing with that? How do members of the public know? And to say that, again, I'm looking at this. The B is ensuring openness and comprehensive stakeholder engagement. Have we not done any engagement at all in terms of our fair trade commitment? I don't believe that's correct. I'm aware that we have done engagement, but yet that box is not ticked. So again, it's trying to understand the context of these tables, who has put these together, on what basis, what evidence, and actually where there are sections missing, what are the actions that we're going to do to improve on that for our next time round? As I say, I appreciate it's just a massive piece of work and it's going to take time, but what's the strategy for going forward with this? Thank you.
I'll let you two decide who wants to answer that.
I'm wondering if maybe Liz could maybe speak to the fair trade one, Chair, if that's through you, if that's okay, and that maybe start with that one first.
Okay, yes, I think that's quite an easy one. I'm afraid to say I think that's probably just a typo, because the fact that it's actually in the list clearly means that we have registered that it has a contribution to make. And obviously, I'm trying to check now last year's one, because the position will not have changed about that. But I suspect that it will be in column A, which is about behaving with integrity and demonstrating a strong commitment to ethical values. I think that was certainly one of the important aspects of fair trade which the council has embodied. And I think you're absolutely correct about it's about a balance in terms of the volume of information. And what we've tried to do in this over the last couple of years is focus on the governance aspects. So, of course, there are wider issues, and indeed your comments today and other colleagues over the years, this is an area that we are improving. But it is about just trying to get the balance without putting everything in, but putting in the main issues that reflect the SIPFA principles.
Anything to add, Vlad?
No, I think that summarises it in terms of the background, which is that CIPFAT, and trying to incorporate what we can within it. Recognising, however, that we are learning with this process, and we'll absolutely take feedback from members in terms of how we can improve it for next year, and we'll be doing so with our colleagues as well. So welcome any particular feedback such as the one given so far in terms of potential improvements, and certainly it looks like there was a wee typo there in that one, and we'll correct that, and I've noted that for correction.
Well, Katie, you come back first, but Fiona's obviously wanting it as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, that was just one particular one. I could possibly go through each of these, and again, just to point out another one, our health and wellbeing strategy. We haven't ticked comprehensive stakeholder engagement. Well, if we're putting together a strategy for health and wellbeing, why on earth are we not doing stakeholder engagement? We're not doing it for our own benefit. We're doing it for the wider community. So, that's just one example. I'm not going to go through each and every one, but to say that that's the only typo or the only one that's missing, I wouldn't necessarily think that's correct. But again, who determines this, and how do we ensure that all of these values are up to date? That's more sort of a wider question rather than the sort of specific nuances of each of these lines. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. So Fiona, do you want to say something now?
Yes, maybe just a few comments, and very much welcome this discussion. I'm very familiar with this process. It's one that I have used for a large number of years. And I do think, the first few years you operate this process, you break the back of it, and you actually get into a position where you're very comfortable with it, and you understand it. Clearly, it founds on self-evaluation, and there is no dodging that issue. This is about what we think of our performance, and self-evaluation relies on constructive support and challenge, and it's really important that that's built into the process. And whilst I haven't been here, I am sure that that will have been the process here. Clearly, the evidence is laid out in that if we are asserting, a 5, then we are pointing to the evidence that gives us a degree of comfort in relation to that. I think for completeness, what we will look at, Chair, is in terms of Appendix 2, we'll maybe just go through that for completeness, and you are approving it as a draft today, subject to any textual adjustments. You're delegating that to the head of governance, and he can be circulating that back to members once that is done. I also think there's a couple of actions within the body of it. On page, they're the outstanding actions, so they're referred to in page 60. Councillor Hagman has already mentioned one, and that's the review of outside bodies. This is really important that we do this. Members need to know that they are making best use of their precious time, and for those organisations who we agree to sit on their bodies, then members of course must be appropriately supported and indeed protected as well. So I've no doubt that action is one that we plan to overtake well in advance of the elections. The other action is one that I would be hopeful that we would manage to conclude for the final council, and that would be the inclusion within the council plan of the climate change objective the council has set itself, along with any updates to our recovery plan. So I would be hopeful that we would overtake that by the time we conclude the annual governance statement. The one point I would want to end on is self-assessments are all about improvement. So what has to come from this is an improvement plan. And I would certainly be wanting to be reflecting on this with the senior leadership team so that we're in a position where we're reflecting on those areas where we are a 3, and we're saying, are we quite content with a 3? or in actual fact, do we want to close that gap? And more importantly, where we're a 5, how do we continue to maintain a 5? So we would be doing that as a senior leadership team, and that would be available to this committee as it would all other committees. Happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. So we've got a couple of members. Look, coming, Stephen, you just came in for what I can see. Councillor Thompson, but Councillor Maitland, you're first. Thanks for that, though.
Thank you, Ian. Right, well, that's extremely interesting, because you've actually, in many ways, covered the point I was going to make. How do you improve on a 5? Obviously, and I take Councillor Young and Councillor Hagman's views about there's been an awful lot of 4s and 5s. Are we really so good at this stage in the iterative process? I wonder. Can I just say that I think it's meant to be an easy read, and there are lots of acronyms. It's really quite indigestible with acronyms. And there is a very small issue of accuracy, which is to do with the Chief Executive's annual performance development review, which is not undertaken by group leaders at the moment. Certainly, I haven't been involved for years, so I think that's been changed, and it's the leader and deputy leader, Councillor Carruthers, you might be able to help me on that one. So that's just a couple of very small things that we ought to be accurate about. I did wonder about the statement in 3.8 about good practice. For example, discussions about ethics and values in team development sessions. I mean, this is extremely interesting. I think probably we maybe when we are actually assessing whether or not it's effective, and I accept that the code of governance is about what we've got in place, not actually about what is being monitored, about it, how it's being monitored. But what sort of things, and how do managers actually assess the effectiveness of their team talks on ethics? I'd be interested to know about how that is considered in the council's operations.
Jane, give me an indication before you go off to who you'd like to answer all or parts of your questions.
Oh, I don't know. I'm simply throwing it out to the office. I'm sure somebody's got an idea what they'd like to say.
Okay, thanks. Well, Fiona, because you said any questions, you had particular points, and James picked up on some. I'll come at you first, then TSL after that, Vlad after that. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Councillor Maitland. You know, for me, it's about making sure that when you reach that standard, then you stay at that standard. And actually, that can be a bigger challenge than reaching it, in my experience. So, you know, it's about maintaining those good standards of conduct and of governance to assure ourselves that we are able to maintain that we would assert to be a 5 in whatever areas. I think some of the points you raise may well be discussions that we will get into in the member officer group round about values and culture, because the first thing is for an organisation to be very clear on its values and its culture and the ethical behaviour and standards which it expects to all to rise to and to maintain. And you know, it's about making that real to everybody's day-to-day work. And it's about picking that up in terms of the support we give to staff and in performance as well. But those very values and ethics are the ones that I would expect to see that would underpin your recruitment policy, that would underpin your succession planning and your promotion and advancement policies within the council, and indeed your redundancy policies. So, you know, I would be expecting the council to be making a very clear statement around the ethics and values that it wishes to promote, and it wishes those to rise to, and the ones that it wishes colleagues to adhere to. And those are the kind of things that, you know, you're constantly checking, both in terms of discussion, but how that is evidenced by all of us, not only in the work we do, but in our behaviours as well. And, you know, I would be expecting we would have in place a range of measures that would give all of us a degree of assurance in these areas. Happy to come back in, Chair, should you wish.
Thank you. Just from your point of view, Jane, if you don't mind, come back in and we can ask Vlad to add value to that if needed, or if you want to come back. Jane?
Well, thank you. I mean, I think that's exactly the sort of discussion I think we probably do have elsewhere in the cultural organisational culture of the council. I totally get that. I wonder about sort of the checking on morale, our systems to check on staff morale, if that's something maybe that is mentioned here. I don't think it particularly is, or maybe I've missed it, but it's not very specifically brought out. I do accept that this statement is not about detail. I mean, that's made quite clear. It's about the big picture. So possibly we just have to be sure that the indication of how we actually comply is linked clearly, but not stated here, if you see what I mean, the way that it's done.
Fiona, you want to come back in?
Well, there's two things. First of all, just an omission in my earlier contribution. I think there are some issues in accuracy in relation to Councillor Maitland's first part of her question that I, of course, wouldn't be able to comment on, wouldn't be appropriate. We'll take it away and we'll check that, Councillor Maitland, in relation to the matter on appraisals. I think if we haven't talked about morale and well-being, then we would absolutely want to, because my sense of only being with you now for 9 weeks is this is a council that has really reached out to staff to make sure they are okay during the pandemic, for those who have been working on the front line and for those who've been working at home, and in a whole variety of ways members and officers have been able to assure themselves in that, and to get wellbeing support to staff who may need it. I'm looking forward to a meeting with the trade unions and in particular Unison on this very matter in the course of the next week. So I think we'll just pick that up as well, Chair and Councillor Maitland, for completeness. Thank you.
Thank you. You okay with that, Jane?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jane. Thanks, Fiona. Thanks for the answers. I've got Councillor McKee as a second, but I'll bring in Councillor Thompson first, so I'll come back to you, Jock. Stephen?
Thanks, Chair, and can I just thank the Chief Executive for her input, which is unexpected and a pleasant surprise today. But just because it's there's a lot of things that she's actually in her words have sort of covered some of the questions that I'd kind of asked. I think the part about this being breaking the back of it, I think was the phrase you used, but just about getting something done sort of puts me in mind of the old-fashioned director just not being sure what to do next on stage and just getting the dancing girls to go up and down, backwards and forwards, so that there's something happening. But as to what the strategy is or why that's happening is not yet clear, but something will emerge from the activity in itself, and maybe that's I'm very conscious this is a self-evaluation thing as well. So we're being presented with what the officers and staff think of themselves in terms of how they are doing, if you like. So I think the points about what we really need to see is, okay, well, if we're taking an action, what improvement do we expect to see? What justifies the action that we've taken to deliver that improvement from where we think we are to where we think we'd like to be? And then there's a kind of sense check, which I'd imagine would be the kind of 360 approach almost, where you're assessing yourself, then, through other forms of scrutiny, that's getting tested against what's being delivered, committee scrutiny functions, etc. So you get a more rounded view, and maybe that's where that fits into the wider picture of good practice nationally. So I'm that's what I think I'm hearing, but I think clearly there's a massive body of work has been taken, but the worry is, we've done all this stuff, but we're not even really sure yet why or how it fits into future improvement. But I think the Chief Executive's words have actually provided me with that assurance, because I think when you're presented with volume, it's hard to target, as a reader, especially if it's not you that's assessing these people. These people are scoring themselves. So it's like, well, I have no idea why you scored yourself a 3 or a 5, So I will take comfort from that. But I think really, I don't have a decent question to ask, so I've effectively just wasted everybody's time. But thanks for that anyway. So I just wanted to add something in today. Thank you.
No, thank you, Stephen. Your contributions are always welcome, and it is valid points, and you're only collectively picked up on. You've almost summarised what everybody else is thinking. So I think we're at a starting point. It's where does it go from here, and ultimately you'll be there as well, Stephen, pushing at least one hand on the rein, I'm sure, giving a bit of steering direction. Councillor McKee, Jock, you want back in?
Thanks, Chair. It's regarding this codes of conduct defining standards of behaviour for members and staff. Has consideration been given to giving new members a wee handbook identifying the conditions of employment? Well, it's no employment, but the conditions they're expected to work to. We don't all work. We haven't all worked in businesses where code of conduct and that sort of thing is applicable, and I just wonder if maybe when people are getting elected, the first thing you hand them before their medal is a wee handbook telling them how to behave themselves. That's not being cheeky to anybody either. Thank you.
No, thank you, Jock. I've had a couple of them. Don't have got one at the last time, but I think as part of the reduction review. But Nick's wanting to answer that, so Nick, I'll give that one to you.
Yes, just to thanks, Chair. Just to say that essentially after each election, I think each council up and down the country reviews its processes for member induction, the type of information that members are provided with immediately, and a wholesale induction programme being arranged. So certainly last time round, back in 2017, we provided members with a lot of information initially, and also there was there still is a member SharePoint site where members can have reference to a whole host of information produced not only by ourselves but also the information service. So there's a lot of information available on there, and you've got the codes of conduct, etc., and guidance from the Standards Commission, etc. So we're always thinking about how we can improve it for next time. So certainly the planning for the induction of the new councillors and welcoming back some of the existing as well will be in train between now and next year in terms of providing for and making sure that members have all the information they need.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you. Vlad, were you wanting to add to that? Just your hands up.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just absolutely, just to back up what Nick said in terms of it's in hand, in terms of carrying out a look at the training, and that's I want to review all the training that's been carried out previously, but also with a view to improving that and bringing in the right speakers and so on for the various parts of it where appropriate. Some of it will be delivered in-house, of course. The guidance, absolutely. Everything from the Code of Conduct guidance, the standing order, scheme of delegations, all of that should be easily accessible to members, and that's the share site that Nick is mentioning. But again, we can improve on that, and that should be easily accessible, because it's not just about us delivering lots of training and not having access to those documents. So the easy accessibility is key here, but also ongoing training. So it's not just a one-off in the induction element of things. There'll be ongoing training in various elements of things, everything from the specifics of committees themselves, and also legislation as we get along, and legislation changes, horizon scanning for that. So I would wish to bring in some kind of scheduling of training. We already carry some of that out within the specific committees, and you'll see some of the seminars that we're delivering, but what we need is maybe just more of a coordinated approach for all members in that regard, but we'll move that forward as part of the overall training portfolio that sits within governance and assurance.
I think there is a feeling out there. Thank you, Joe. That there might be a bit of a churn at the next election, so I think it's a very valid point that you're picking up on there, Joe. There might be quite a number of new members because of people obviously wanting to. I think they've got to a point where they're ready to move on and do something different, retire or otherwise. And look at the recommendations. Don't say any other hands. Look at the recommendations. So 2.1, I think, is a fait accompli. And we've done that. We've considered the evaluation of council's compliance with the principles contained in the CIPFA Code of Corporate Governance as set out in paragraphs 3.8 to 3.9 as per Appendix 2. When we go to 2.2 and 2.3, I'll just touch on that. So, Vlad, we're being asked to agree the draft annual governance statement as set on the paragraphs 3.10 to 12, as per Appendix D in particular. So I'll just mention briefly one point. So it's at the very end, page 61. And it's the very last bullet point, but I'll put it into context. It says on the basis, so it's as part of the conclusion, there's a number of bullet points under there. It says on the basis of the review of governance arrangements for 2020 to 21, it is confirmed that the Council has ensured elected members and officers have the capacity and capability to deliver its purpose effectively. I'm not going into detail at this moment in time. It's something worth discussing, I think, maybe offline in a workshop or something. But I'm not totally satisfied and happy in regards to that. I don't feel completely comfortable with that particular bit. And so we are undertaking support for members' review, so the full council will make a decision. And 24 things that will add value. And my understanding is we're doing a piece of work in governance and actually having the right people at the committee at the right times with effective skills, knowledge, and I suppose qualification. So I know that's ongoing, and we're reflecting back on last year. So I suppose my question is really in regards to that, because again at 2.3 it talks about we're delegating the finalising of this, and you've touched on that, Nick touched on it earlier, to yourself to actually sign this off completely. So I suppose 2 points. Do you think we'll see a difference by this time next year? Because I wonder if I'll feel more comfortable with that statement next year, because I don't feel very comfortable with that statement as it stands. And if there's a material change, I think Fiona touched on it earlier, so material change as you go forward over the next few weeks, will that be reflected back to members? What's the process? A wee bit of feedback there. Just what is the process coming back to members? Because ultimately we're agreeing the draft, but you're getting the privilege, so to speak, of signing it off.
Chair, would it be helpful if I just come in on that point, if you don't mind, and maybe just to go back, if you don't mind as well. Now, whilst Councillor Thompson didn't ask a direct question, his thoughts were very helpful, and just to assure members, this is not about looking busy. This is about fundamentally the council assessing how good the council thinks it is in relation to its arrangements for governance and assurance. And what is laid before you is not what officers think of officers, it's officers' professional judgment in relation to the council. And this committee, along with every other committee, as it puts its hand to this and gets to the council, effectively at the end of the day, this will be the council statement about itself, which, if I recall correctly, myself, if I'm here, and the leader of the council will sign off on behalf of the council. And Councillor Thompson is absolutely right. There's all sorts of checks and balances along the way, whether it's customer feedback, whether it's complaints, whether it's surveys, whether it's our stakeholder engagement, audits and inspections are all of the things that we need to take in the round. But this is very much a foundation document that will be looked at by external auditors and inspectors when they come in. So it's very much part of our continuous improvement. And what I would like you to add to the recommendations is that we will be producing an improvement plan, which will come back to this committee at a future date, that will set out the action that we're going to take to move to focus on those areas where we think we need to focus on. In relation to the point that you are raising, then I would trust the very fact that members are able to conduct the affairs of the council in the way that you are, and officers are able to perform their duties in the way that you are, would give you sufficient assurance in order to be able to sign this off just now, notwithstanding that you have work in train that's around looking at improvement, and that will always be the case. Next year, I expect you will see significant improvement in the areas you want to see improvement on, and that's very much part of your journey. Thanks. I hope that's helpful, Chair.
It was very helpful. Thanks, Fiona. That last point in particular was key for me. It's the change between now. I think we're at the starting point. There may well be dancing girls on the stage going from side to side. It's the way Stephen's described it, but I do think that we will see the improvements as we go forward, because members are keen to see us. We've been through a rough time over the last 10, 11 years. I think we can go back to Jane's. She picked up on it. Used to be group leaders, used to do the personal development side or the appraisal for the chief executive. It's 10, 11 years now since that changed, Jane. There's a number of things that I think should be in play, especially under the circumstances with the council's, it's formatted as it stands at the moment. There's a number of things here we need reassurance, but I feel confident. I certainly feel more confident now. So I think what members, for the sake of ourselves, if we could agree 2.2 as it stands, we're agreeing Appendix 3 in particular, it doesn't refer to the report itself. We're delegating to head of governance. If we're content with this, please speak up. If you're not, we're delegating to head of governance. I did think, maybe you mentioned earlier, Fiona, that we might see, if there's any kind of material change, we would see that. But I think more importantly, what you've reflected there, will be a 2.4 that we'll see an improvement plan to come back to this committee outlining the improvements we would expect, or whatever shape that report will come back. I'll open it to members first, then I'll just get clarity in regards to the way that's been set out. Nobody's coming in, so I'll take that as being content with that as a way forward. Vlad, I'll let you just come in and finish off, please. So I think we've agreed 2.3 to 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and the improvement plan, just the wording on that, please.
Yeah, as I understand the further recommendation, which is up for agreement of the committees, that we will come back to this committee in regards to bringing back an improvement plan, which will specifically look at any actions that we need to take to improve the annual governance statement and overall governance of the organisation. So we're happy to come up with some wording for that, Chair, to reflect that point. But overall, I think the main part of it is that it needs to be delegated just simply in terms of the timing of it, as Nick pointed out, because the various committees and the feedback from them also being encompassed within that overall outcome, which will obviously add to that improvement plan depending on the feedback we get for the various committees.
Thank you. Thanks very much. That says moving on to item number 5 then. Getting feedback. I don't know if it's me or you've got a speaker on. I'll just let you, maybe it's coming back through yourself, Vlad, because your mic's still on, Vlad. I'm getting a wee bit of feedback.
My mic is still on, Chair. However, just to speak to this next item, but I'll...
No problem. Just straight over item number 5 is a risk register. If you could add a wee bit in regards to why it's here, please. Thank you.
Yep, this particular report, Chair, is here, as you'll see at this point, simply for noting in terms of the various stages that we've gone through for the risk management framework, which was approved in 2018, as you'll see within paragraph 3.1. On top of that, members will be aware that the FPT review has also specifically looked at the risk management arrangements and risk management as a whole, and has made certain recommendations within it, which includes reporting via the Audit Risk and Scrutiny Committee bullet point, which is there under 3.2, and that's where we're at this point in time. In terms of these were all accepted by full council, the FPT Review Committee recommendations on the 17th of December, and thereafter FPT Committee on the 17th of February 2021 as well. And you'll see under 3.3 there's a report to Audit Risk and Scrutiny Committee on risk management arrangements, and also to hold an Audit Risk and Scrutiny Committee workshop on risk management to reflect the recommendations and any changes to the risk management policy and framework. As members will be aware, we're carrying out that workshop on the 30th of this month, and therefore we would look to take feedback from members, which will obviously lead to potential further changes in terms of our approach to that risk management element of things. The first 2 actions have been delivered already, and that member workshop, as I mentioned, will be on the 30th of June. The members have received a report on the Council's risk management arrangement and progress at its meeting on the 10th of December 2020, and this is a further update on that. You will see within the appendices that you've got in essence, the 3 risk registers at the moment, which is something that we maybe look at, whether we have one corporate one in the future, but that's up for discussion within the relevant workshops. And at the moment, we've got 3. So one's titled Council-wide risks, which could be deemed the corporate one. Then you've got specific COVID one, and also the UK existing the EU risks. So those are the 3 risk registers that you've got in front of you, and they're found within the appendices. The overall report, in essence, takes you through the history of the framework, how it was approved, and what the FPT review has recommended in terms of refining that and improving that, and the next steps that we're taking, in particular in regards to the members' workshop, which will be an opportunity to further discuss risk management within that.
Thank you very much, Vlad. So what I'll do is I've got a couple of members wanting to speak, but just outline my own thoughts briefly, just in regards to the way forward. So Fiona, I'd like to come, we've discussed this particular item, and you and I had a conversation. So I've asked for this to come to the committee for a number of years now, and it was always felt by officers that it wasn't really appropriate, we shouldn't see it. So I suppose, Fiona, what I'll ask you today is because you and I had a discussion, we discussed what kind of things were on audit committees in other councils, East Ayrshire I think it is in particular, and this was like a standard agenda item. So I'd like you kind of touch on that if you feel the relevance and importance, but at the very end I'd like to take members' questions first, just to put it into context, and I'd like to understand from members what they expect and what value this will bring to them as we go forward. But whether I think, should it be a standing agenda item? If it is, if we feel that, then it will be. But if, like I said, I'm appreciative of Fiona's movements here. I did ask for it for quite a while, and as soon as she took her mind to be on the agenda, it was here. So I do appreciate that. So we've got Councillor Hardwin first. Katie, you're first.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Vlad, for the introduction to this item. I think it's really important, and the fact that our previous item actually makes reference to reviewing the effectiveness and framework for managing risks. So we've just, we've noted that draft, and it says quite clearly in there that this committee has a remit for the independent assurance of the adequacy of the risk management framework. So I think the workshop that's coming up is absolutely crucial, and it's certainly one that I think should possibly be open to all members, not just the members of Audit, Risk and Scrutiny. Now, I don't know if the invite has been sent to all members, but certainly I think if we're going to be doing a workshop on audits or on the risk registers, the fact that every directorate has a risk register, it should potentially be open to all, and if it's not, then there needs to be almost another workshop, because as elected members, it's our responsibility to ensure that the council is working in the best way possible. I've got a few questions on the reports or the risks that were actually highlighted towards us, and I'm wondering, obviously there's, again, I'm sure many of my sort of questions will be answered at the workshop, so maybe I need to hold back until that point, but then we do have a report in front of us. We're being asked to note it, and I'm just wondering, at what point does this live document get updated? And again, I'm going to go back to what I was talking about in the previous item, sitting on outside bodies. Many of the outside bodies that I sit on, they all have risk registers, and they're all done in slightly different ways. They've got different ways of reporting it. But the common theme for all of them is we have, what are the current risks? What's the mitigation we're doing? And then where does that leave us? And I'm not sure what the current risk matrix is. This before we've put in place our mitigation, or is this after we've put in the risk of our mitigation? Do you know, so is this before or after our input? I'm thinking it's maybe after, and there is quite a lot of in the reds on here, which is slightly concerning. What are we doing to reduce that down to amber or green level? Just to pick up on a few of the issues, we've got the COVID-19 risks, but we're not mentioning what COVID has to our council priorities. So I would like to see, the council priorities always being looked at in terms of the risks, in terms of these issues. We've also got the exiting the EU risks. And again, I'm not quite sure where we're at with this, because the very first one on that, on page 85, makes reference to exporting of locally produced foodstuffs. Well, online and social media, we're seeing local food producers saying they cannot export any longer. And, the ethical dairy being one of them. I'm also aware of artists, of which the creative industry in Dumfries and Galloway is actually hugely beneficial to our economy. They're not able to get supplies on printing, etc., because of the EU. So I'm not sure whether that amber is actually correct. And in terms of our workforce, we're sitting in green on page 86. Now, healthcare, and I appreciate the NHS is not the council, but they are one of our partners, and home care and the amount of EU nationals working within our healthcare settings with delivering home care is significant, and it's significant right across Scotland. So again, I'm not convinced that should be at the lowest level of green in terms of our workforce. And again, I'm sort of slightly baffled as to why we've got demonstrations and disorder in amongst this risk register. Yes, we're sitting in green, and is maybe more of a political discussion. I'm hugely concerned by the policing bill that's going through Westminster, the legislation which is looking to stop demonstrations. Surely, as a local authority, we want to empower our communities so that if things aren't going right, they feel empowered to actually come to us, and maybe not in a disorder or demonstration type of scenario. But again, we should be looking at all these issues. So yeah, as I say, many of these points can maybe be brought up in the workshop, but I guess my question is, why have we got the report today before us if we can't adjust it, or if it's not? Is it purely for noting? Is it just going to be a standing item that we sort of look at it and note it? Because again, in the previous item, it makes reference to the senior management team adjusting and approving. But that senior management team is not the Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee, but yet the Audit and Risk and Scrutiny Committee is the one that has the remit. So where do we sit as a community, as a committee, in terms of ensuring that our risks are properly looked at and any mitigation is put in place?
So two points here, Kate, just before they come in, Vlad. And I'll invite Fiona on the first point. Why is it here today? And then Vlad, if you don't mind coming in with the rest stuff, please.
I think I'm probably going to veer into the second point as well, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hagman. There's a lot packed in there in terms of your questions. So, Chair, in fairness to your officers, this was something that they had in training to bring the risk register to this committee. It is the appropriate place for it to come, and it would be my expectation that this would occur probably no more than 4 times a year. I do not think you want to have it as a standing item. I think you want to be proportionate in your actions based upon what you understand the arrangements to be within the Council's senior leadership team for the review of the risk registers. And it is important. It's not either or, Councillor Hagman, it's not either the chief officers do it or the committee do it. In actual fact, the senior leadership team should do this, and in their professional view and professional recommendations, they should set out this for you. And if I can, I would actually ask you to endorse this and not simply to note for the committee's interests and responsibilities. I would want to have had more time on this than I have been able to. You will note, members, this was reviewed. I think we actually looked at it on the 24th of May as a senior leadership team, and it's clearly been generated the day following. I would actually like to spend more time on this than I have been able to. I don't think this is sufficiently high level enough for the risk and audit, for the audit risk and scrutiny committee's purposes. And I also think it would benefit from streamlining. So in presenting this to you today, can I, well, one, ask that you endorse the approach that has been taken, because I think it's very important that you can take confidence in this, and agree when you next look at it, which would be after the summer recess, then it would be with an expectation that it will have been subject to further review. And in actual fact, we just take the opportunity to streamline this. You know, I think, notwithstanding EU, I think we should see one consolidated high-level council risk register, and it would be my expectation, based on previous experience with members, that members would want to look at this on a quarterly basis. Happy to add anything further or come back in, Chair.
Katie, it's up to you.
Yeah, Chair, I mean, thank you, Fiona. That's really, you know, it's really valuable to get feedback from yourself. In terms of having one high-level risk management assessment document, would you be envisaging a high-level council-wide one coming to audit, risk and scrutiny, but the individual business plans and risks going to each of the service committees? And would the audit, risk and scrutiny committee have any remit or role in terms of those risks? Because I appreciate, you know, we can't do everything, and to try and fit everything into one committee and one document is again, it's a mammoth task. Look at the last item. So, you know, is your recommendation that we as an audit, risk and scrutiny committee just have that high level report for the council wide, and we don't have a remit almost into the individual directorates?
If it's okay for me to come back in, Chair, I think that's exactly it, Councillor Hagman. I think you have nailed it. It is up to directorates to report their risks to their committees, and for committees to have that responsibility. That delegation sits with them. Equally, it is important that committees have the facility to escalate. So something can begin as a service risk and it can become a council risk. So they would have the facility to escalate it to this committee if it considered that the risk was so significant it was a council risk. I would hope that the senior leadership team, that we were ahead of that, and we were actually bringing that to you. And I think over time what we would see is, you know, risks being de-escalated, because clearly if everything's a risk, nothing's a risk. So, you know, that we would have, in terms of our arrangements, a clear audit trail as to the identification of risk, either the elimination or the mitigation of that risk, and therefore the de-escalation of it off the register, and a clear audit trail. That's certainly what our insurers would be expecting to see, and those are the kind of standards we'd be wanting to adhere to. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Fiona. So, Vlad, I'm absolutely aware that you're the lead for here, and I don't know what to seem to be undermining anyway. So come in, because there's a number of points, and you obviously have your own points to make in regards to what Katie's questions and comments.
Yeah, I agreed within the discussions that we've had internally is about how we best drive this forward, and absolutely that high level risk register is absolutely one of the main aims and objectives within that discussion, and also the practicalities of how those risks are managed within the various service committees. So that absolutely we will look at that and consider that and improve on that. Because that's already happening. It's just that we need to maybe improve on those particular processes. It's already incorporated within our business planning approach and the risks that are attached to that. The other element of it, which is just worthy of noting as well, is that the way I'm used to elsewhere is the relevant audit risk and scrutiny committee also has the opportunity to do deep dive into those high level corporate risks, which allows officers to come in and speak to them and Councillor Hagman has pointed out a few of these in which I might not be the best person to speak to that, and it's the relevant owner of that risk that would come in, speak to it, give full context, and specifically the mitigations that have been taken that either lowers that risk as best we can, or points to why that risk might be sitting at a higher level. So that's important, and that's the scrutiny role that you would need to carry out, and that particular that sits very clearly within the scheme of delegations and the other risk scrutiny committee, particularly in 5.67, which is that independent assurance of the adequacy of the risk management framework. So moving forward, that's certainly where I would want to take it. I think that the workshop that's coming up will allow us to have some of those discussions.
Excuse me, thank you, thanks for that, Vlad. Katie, I take it you'll be happy enough with what Vlad's saying there as well?
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. I'll look forward to the workshop and possibly maybe see some examples of different ways of presenting some of the information so we can see the mitigations. But no, I'll look forward to the workshop. Thank you very much for the full answers from both Fiona and Vlad. Thanks.
Thank you. Stephen, you're next, Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so I mean, a lot of this has been covered in the very thorough questions and answers already on this, but I think there is certainly something about whether it's a high level overarching sort of risk register that we see here at this committee, obviously with the scheme of delegation allowing each service committee to look at that in more detail. There's maybe an additional follow-on thing which we might want to look at, which is about in the current delegations to service committees, while it sets out often a line about performance indicators, for example, it's not specific necessarily about how risk comes into that as well. So, you know, often service committees will have performance reports, exception reports, etc., but not consistently across the piece a risk register that belongs to that service committee area, if you like. So I think there's maybe a bit of follow-through work on that. I'm just looking at the social work delegations at the moment, so it talks about performance, etc., but it doesn't, although we will be made aware of risks, I don't know if we'll be made aware of it in a consistent format such as this document sets out. So how, that we're doing it, I'm sure we are. How we're doing it maybe could be improved, because that's what we're all about. So that's maybe one point. The other thing is on that then, there is the part about the mitigations. Councillor Hagman made the point well, and it has been partly addressed, but I think there is something about, if we're saying here's the current risk, here's where we think the risk will go if we take this mitigation. So there's a kind of measurable, in motion approach to work, rather than here's a snapshot, here's what we're doing, and then at the next committee you've kind of forgotten where you were, what you did, and how effective it was. Potentially, you know, I mean, obviously academics and students will be much more au fait with that, but is there a way we can capture that in the actual document so it's sort of alive in a sense, and we're almost like saying, well, those mitigations are working, or we did them because we thought they would work. So that it's actually sort of saying, are we making good judgments? Can we improve that? So there's a whole, I mean, there's probably a rich theme there, or it's you know, superfluous, I don't know, but I think there is something about how we capture that, whether it's at a service committee level or at this level, rather than just listing actions, which again, well, I'll not use metaphors because I'll probably get in trouble already for using one earlier, but so yeah, that would be my comments on that. So and on finally on that, with that, I don't know then if I can endorse this, but I might endorse the approach, but note the contents, if you see what I mean. So just to be fair, it's like we know we're going the right way, so and we're happy to do that, but note the current contents, and obviously it's going to come back in an improved format, if you like, if that's okay, Chair.
Thanks, Steve. No, thanks, Stephen. My thoughts are the same. I don't think we've been endorsed any of it. I was going to leave my comments to last, as usual. But I think because it's here, it's a very simple report. We've been asked to note it. We've explained the circumstances why it's here. But I think after after we had a workshop, we understand how the flow charts for the service committees, how they will now feed up into here. I know I've still got John, but But I'm going to bring Vlad in first because he's our lead here. Just so make sure then you can come in after that, Fiona, if you feel it's appropriate. Vlad, because Councillor Thompson's brought up a couple of points here, maybe questions, but I would struggle personally to support the endorse at this point in time.
Yeah, in terms of the risks registers, obviously I went through the history of that, and these have been approved at the relevant committees and council previously. Obviously it's coming up for, we have put it for noting, but bear in mind that Fiona has absolutely asked for that endorsement of what we've got at the moment with a view to making a slicker process and also improving the overall corporate risk register approach. I think what Councillor Thompson has raised are maybe in line with what Councillor Hagman has also mentioned in terms of that reporting mechanisms and how do we best scrutinise that, which again I refer to that my previous answer, which is in essence, yes, service committees need to lead on those particular risks, and thereafter the more corporate element is dealt with within audit risk and scrutiny, with an option to do those deep dives that maybe look specifically at the type of questions that both councillors have been referring to, which allows us to look at the mitigations and the various actions that have been taken, and therefore provide you with an assurance of the risk level that has been put in front of you. So I don't know if I can add anything more to that point. Absolutely, I think we're in a journey here. We obviously started in 2018 with the framework. We've been improving that as we go along, and we'll continue to streamline that and improve it, particularly with the support of Fiona taking that forward.
Thank you. Fiona, anything to add? Then I'll bring Stephen back.
I actually think Councillor Thompson makes a really important distinction based on the discussion that we are having. And I would hope members could endorse the proposed approach and fully accept that you may just want to note the contents of this report and the risk registers as they presently stand. And I agree with Councillor Hagman's suggestion that the invitation should be extended to all members of the council. This is about how we manage risk across the council, and it very much plays to the leadership role of this committee within this area. I think we need to just articulate in a much more detailed way how service committees keep their risks in sight, and how this committee as well, maybe just in the very simple way that it is presented to you today, keeps an oversight without doing the job of service committees for them of the risks that service committees have. But to go back to Councillor Thompson's point about, you know, the sufficiency of the actions, these aren't actions for action's sake. And, you know, with a high level number of risks, this committee will want to satisfy itself that the actions that are proposed are indeed adequate and sufficient. And you will want to hear next time round about the sufficiency and the adequacy of those actions, and demonstrably, it's one of the few areas you will see that either will lead to or not lead to a reduction in the risk. And, you know, I think there are areas where you will want to take a deep dive. So this is very much the beginning of a route map for you, and I would hope members you would feel able to endorse the approach that is proposed here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. I think Kevin's wanting as well, but Stephen, I'll let you come back first, and if it's on the same point, Kevin, which it probably is.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, nothing more to say other than no, that's completely fine. I think I've sort of painted a target on me for sort of suggesting that we're not doing anything for good reasons, but that's not really what I'm driving at. But no, I'm happy with those answers. I think the thing is, I'm just looking at a few other delegations to committees front sheets, and you know, I think we could do to articulate the fact that we're not just measuring performance, we're monitoring risk as well. So that that's maybe just housekeeping really, but I'm sure that would follow through from the workshops and sort of pieces of work that we're going to do anyway. And happy with that, Chair, and for Fiona and Vlad's answers there. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Kevin, I'll bring in, if it was on the same point, Kevin, just, or was it something different?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. It's a point of clarification and also an observation I'd like to make to you. But before I do that, I just want to check. I thought Councillor Maitland had put her hand up earlier. I'm not absolutely certain if she has the point's moved on or whether she wanted to speak. She wanted to speak. I'd defer to let her speak first. Can I check that with you, please, Chair?
I picked you up earlier, Jane. I didn't see your hand coming back up, unless I'm wrong there.
I've written speak, please. Sorry, so you probably couldn't see it in the chat. Chairman, I was simply going to come in and say that I rather agree with you that I don't think I want to endorse the contents of the...
Jane, hold on a second. I'll tell you what it is. I didn't want Kevin to be chairing this because we've got Councillor Young in front of you. And Kevin, the reason I picked you and there was it on the same point as for Stephen Thompson's question. Then I'll bring the members in as appropriate.
I do apologise.
That's fine, Jane. That's fine. Kevin, was it on the same point as Stephen Thompson?
Apologies, Chair. Just a point of clarification. All members have been invited to the workshop.
Thank you. Thanks, Kevin. Fine. Good. So it's Councillor Young next. Then I'll come at you. Sorry about that, Jane. I'll come at you after that. John.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies, Jane, for coming in before you. No, it's been a very interesting and full discussion this morning. Very welcome. I've enjoyed members' contributions greatly. It's interesting to hear Vlad say we've been monitoring risks since 2018, but my concern is what we're getting here is a snapshot of the risks over the last 6 months. We're not able to see trends. We're not able to spot areas where the risks are increasing or hopefully decreasing. And my other point is on Appendix 1. It's again, who is responsible for putting in the ticks stating a particular service is low, medium or high risk? I presume it's a service manager. I'm asking because I was present at the Education and Learning Committee of the 13th of May, and one of our areas of concerns is on page 70, failure to reduce the gap in attainment, and that is ticked as a low risk. I believe it was signalled with a red flag at the Education Committee, and I would say in particular there's a lot about education and delivering outcomes for our children at the moment that I would say is high risk, but in this document it's ticked as low risk. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. Vlad, is that to you?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yeah, in terms of the questions about the service business plans, heads of service and thereafter directors will see the service plans and the risks associated and incorporated within those business plans, and that they'll be constantly monitored, and that's where that assessment and that allocation is made, and therefore it does fall within the relevant service to allocate the scoring there. However, I absolutely identify with what's been said in terms of obviously if a particular risk has been highlighted at committee as being rather high and that's not reflected here, the service should be looking at that and considering that and adjusting it as appropriate. So I think that's a valid point, but again, I think these are the type of things that would be dealt with within the relevant committees when they are scrutinising those specific risks within those business plans.
John, I think Fiona's want to come in on the same point. Fiona?
Maybe just both points actually Councillor Young has helpfully raised. I mean, I do think what is likely to emerge from the workshop is in fact an operating protocol in respect of our risk management that further enhances our arrangements, particularly with regard to elected member review, scrutiny and agreement. And you know, we will want to, I think, perhaps extend the delegations of committees in relation to this, so it is a conscious thought and a conscious decision for the committee to, on the basis of officer recommendations put to them, to agree or otherwise the assessment of risk. I mean, that's what sits at the heart of this, members, that we have really robust arrangements in place for the management, mitigation and elimination of risk. The point Councillor Young makes is a really good one, and I know you don't want to spend your time looking back. It's important that we look forward, but in that looking forward, you will be able to look back. And, you know, if I just reflect on my own experience, then areas that would have been on risk registers, council-wide, high level previously, that would have been taken off the registers would have been issues like equal pay. They would have been on for a long time until we absolutely satisfied ourselves that we'd dealt with that, or the restoration of former open cast coal sites. So those are two that I can think of where, you know, we managed those risks over a number of months and indeed years, and saw their elimination. And that's what members will be able to see here. So in short, I think the workshop's a great idea. I think coming out of the workshop, what we want is an operating protocol that may well require to be enshrined within our delegations as well. So it's very clear the roles and responsibilities of service directors, service committees, the lead officers for this committee, and indeed this committee itself. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Fiona. John, just in case there's anything else.
No, I'll pass the baton over to Jane. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, John. Jane, over to you.
Thank you. Actually, the points were very largely covered by Councillor Young's contribution. I would just say that if we are being required to provide assurance of a risk framework, then I would hope that what will come out in the seminar will indicate how we could introduce a new strategic risk once we've thought about it, if you see what I mean. Because it's not entirely clear how members would suggest that there is this particular risk. This is an officer-driven risk assessment, and members must be quite clear as to how they put in a risk. I would suggest there are some external risks to the council on the political agenda on the horizon, and I'm not clear how we would feed that in. But that's for the seminar.
Okay, good point. I think it's well made, that, Jane. My own expectations from seeing this here today is to see from the service stroke corporate committees, they can feed back up through, and I use an example, and it's the trunk roads, for example. Ultimately, the chances are high that if that had been identified as a risk, returning a loss rather than a surplus, that would have been, we would have seen that, or the audit committee would have seen that at some point, the previous historically, and we could have drilled right down into the minutiae, potentially, and found out exactly what was going on there. As it stands, the Enterprise and Defence and Galloway committee at the time just sat kind of on its hands there for whatever reason, and didn't. Well, in fact, I think it struggled to access information. You can go back to DG First Management Committee. So this is where I think it's important. I am still struggling to endorse, but I'll let you give another shot at that if you want, Fiona. But I think this is the starting point. I do think this is the starting point. We note this. We see, we'll have a workshop, and we'll see the framework. We'll see the flow charts. How, going back to the member comments, how members have direct input if they want to see a different risk, if they want to see how the EU is being affected, how we're looking at that corporately. There's so much to discuss. It'll be a full 3 or 4 hours, I would think, with the way this conversation went on this morning. So I'm more than happy to note it. But I mean, if you want to have another shot, we can reflect on whether we endorse it or not. But please be clear on what you're asking for. Thanks. Which I know you will, Fiona.
Okay, thanks. Well, members, rest assured I very much know my place in the scheme of things, and ultimately it is for you to decide. You know, I did say that I thought Councillor Thompson made a very important distinction in terms of note the report. I would hope you could endorse the proposed approach that has been taken and discussed here, because you are agreeing to it effectively, and whilst that approach in itself will lead to what Councillor Maitland describes, you know, as your risk and assurance framework, then I would hope you could endorse at least the approach that has been discussed here. Thank you.
I'm fine with that, members. So we know it as per the recommendations. So we just add to that. I think Tracy is I know you're taking note of this, and you've probably got it already. That we note the contents of the council's risk register and endorse the approach as discussed within the meeting. is what you're saying. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thanks very much. Number 6. It's a follow-up internal audit reports considered by the committee in December 2020. So we've got every paper here, so I'm looking at it. It's probably Kevin, yourself, looking at the report author. It's quite a simple report. So the purpose of this report is to allow the committee to satisfy itself that control issues identified by internal audit have been appropriately addressed by management. It covers the new audit work considered by members in December 2020 and the decision to continue follow-up of the audit report on off payroll work as IR35 made at the same committee meeting. Kevin, you want to speak to this one?
Yes, Chair, happy to introduce it. So this is a standing report on the agenda of the committee based on its decision to follow up all internal audit reports after 6 months. So these reports were first reported in December, so we're just at the 6 months. Plus there was a rollover report on IR35, which was also at December for conclusion, but you agreed to hold it open and bring it forward to the next reporting point. We have officers here from services available to answer questions to members if you wish, Chair, to invite them to speak. We have 3 new reports and 1, as I say, carried forward report. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Thanks, Kevin. I'll open it up to the floor. If we want, we can do Appendix 1 on page 95. Discuss that one first. Councillor McKee. Joe, Councillor McKee, did you have your hand up there? Sorry, I thought I seen a hand coming up, but it's maybe.
Aye, somebody switched my mic off on the computer.
Oh,
I'll speak to Tracy later. No, on page 98, it talks about people signing things in a weekly cash book reconciliation signed by the officer who prepares it and one other. And although it's no a reflection on the people who are signing, but I think a third signature gives comfort to the other two. Two people getting together can form a friendship quicker than 3, and having 3 being more independent, I think would be a safer way for the staff concerned. But that's only my view on it. We'll just wait to see what anybody else has got to say, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Jock. Kevin, I'll let you come back. When I read it, I got the assurances that were there within the report that actually would be a third later on independent review of it. But Kevin, do you want to come back, please?
Thank you, Chair. This relates to the cash book reconciliation. What we found was that the person preparing the reconciliation wasn't signing it, which we asked them to do. And we noted there were 2 points of review after that. The key review, the first review, is by their line manager. And then there's a third one, which was not adding any value whatsoever in control terms. So as always, audit is not just about adding more controls, it's sometimes removing ones which don't serve a function. So that's why we made this recommendation or this suggestion that in fact you drop the third one, and that the arrangements we would recommend that the arrangements as established are quite sufficient, Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. Councillor McKee, are you happy enough with that?
Well, as long as they're comfortable, but it's more for the 2 people who are signing. It gives them a further comfort, I think. But we are where we are. As long as it's working, that's the main thing.
So just when we're on page 98 then, if we go to page 99, it talks about the recommendation is to close the report on the basis it's been substantially delivered. Just coming in, you've certainly made comments there. Come back to the Appendix 1 again, so on page 96. It's a recommending that on the basis of the actions taken and clear commitments given in respect of any future programme. Okay. It's 5 years away, so again, my screen's gone off. Somebody coming in. Anybody else coming in? Any particular points? Vlad?
Yes, sorry, Chair. I don't know. Were you expecting, Chair, to Kevin to come in to those points?
No, not really. I'm looking for members to come in. So I think from Councillor McKee's point, I think we've addressed that when it's whether we decide to actually close it, because that's what I think we've been asked to. Well, we've been asked to note the comments in regards to the progress, but decide if any of the internal audit reports are to be included in the future. So I'm just trying to get to the point that I think we're content that we just let them go. We've exhausted them. That's where I'm just trying to get to Vlad and get an understanding of what the committee's feelings are in regards to that.
I'm quite happy to let it go, Chair.
Thank you. So we'll take that as given then. So I don't see anybody coming in asking for any future to come back up. So it's 2.1. Note and comment. So we've done that, and we haven't done any deep dives, so to speak. I think we've seen these a number of times. We've satisfied with what's in, and we've decided there's any future follow up. Okay, thank you very much. Item number 7. This is Richard, I think, this time. Richard, is it yourself leading this one?
Richard's on leave, Chair. Sorry, your note should say that I'm to speak to this one. Apologies.
I know, apologies, Kevin. I mean, so I couldn't find my note for this one, so I looked up the last one in regards to that. So, purpose of this report is it's a standing item on the agenda of the committee to allow members to discuss the reports issued by internal audit. We've been asked to note and comment on the finalised internal audit reports. But Kevin, you want to speak to this first, I'm sure.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. So, yes, this is a report on the purchase to pay system. Members will recall that we have previously produced a report on central creditors, which was not entirely satisfactory, but a number of the issues and problems were indicated as being dealt with through the new purchase to pay system. So we agreed to do a follow-up review, and that's what this is. This is a high-level sort of follow-up review on the purchase to pay system. And to establish that, if you like, the sort of rollover things from central creditor system previously have been dealt with. There's a big change in this system. This system is more than just a payment system. This system tries to link contracts and purchasing to payment, and achieving that is quite challenging, but we have got a good system in place. And although it came in on the 1st of April 2020, and it was very useful and it adapted well for home working and so on. It was successful in some respects. In the main, it's a good system, but there is some development work still required. The format for the report has been altered. Members may recall at the last meeting we had a discussion about the presentation of the report. So we've reverted it to portrait style. We've tried to box it to make it easier, I think, to follow the points and the response. So what we've got on the left-hand column is control adequacy, as we call it, which is about control design and the nature of that. And then the second one is, if you like, a compliance type column. You know, that's where we're putting compliance type remarks, effectiveness. So there's quite a few points in this report, and we've got 3 recommendations which management has agreed to do. So I draw your attention to section 5, which has got the management responses in, but also sitting underneath section 5 are some other management intentions that were reported to us by management during the course of the audit work. So we've listed those because we felt there were more than 1 or 2, so we felt it might be useful to summarise those at the bottom of the report. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. Couldn't see my mic was on there. Thank you very much. I think Jane, I'm not sure if you're wanting in that, just a comment, and then if you're not wanting in, it's Katie after that. Councillor Maitland, were you wanting in?
That was the previous item, Chairman.
Sorry, thank you. Thanks so much. Councillor Hagman, Jane, Katie, you're first.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. So my question is, I noticed we're being asked to note and comment on the finalised internal audit report. Will this come back to committee in 6 months, as we have done with other just to ensure that the actions are taken forward? I just wanted to double check that. And I mean, I appreciate first of all, thank you. I think being in the format that's been put forward is certainly an improvement, and obviously we did get feedback last time and it's been taken on board, so thank you. Not working in portrait is actually, I find it very much more preferable. In terms of the sort of final report, there's a couple of issues on here. So on page 106, we've got training for users, and there was no findings and no further action points, but it didn't make reference as to whether everybody had completed the training or not. So we've noted that there's training available, but has the training been completed? Because, and this goes back to some of the sort of findings that we've looked at within other reviews, is we can have the policies and procedures in place, but are they being used? Are they being, so the training is there. Are all staff members completing their training? So that would be useful. And certainly in reference number 5, it talks about keeping scanned documents of goods received, and management recognise the importance of keeping that, and there's further consideration will be given, but it's not an action point that we're either going to actually continue to keep that or not, or is that captured under the management intentions? So I guess it would be quite useful to know what's the difference between the management intentions and the action points. So, if the management actually change their mind on the intentions, are they not going to do these 10 points that have been highlighted? Are they optional? And only the first 3 are compulsory. It would be quite useful to have a distinction between those two. Thank you.
Chair, should I speak?
Yeah, please, thank you.
Okay, so dealing with the points in turn. Yes, the report will come back, as all internal audit reports do, in 6 months' time with a progress report in terms of the actions. The immediate focus, dancing ahead a wee bit, sorry to the final point, but I'll come back to that also. The feedback report, the update report, will deal with the 3 recommendations principally, but it will also reference the other points as well, which are not recommendations. I'll explain about that in a second, though, if that's okay. I'm pleased to hear that members are happy with the improved format. As I say, we developed it with your assistance, so it's very much a sort of joint effort. And if it is a satisfactory presentation, that's to everybody's benefit, I think. In terms of training at 10.6, yes, so the system is new and required different operational requirements. So if you think about it in sort of, we have the general population of officers to train in its use, and also the operational staff. So operational staff will not have been allowed onto the system until they'd completed the training in how to do it. And therefore we can be certain that, yes, people who require to process stuff on the system have received training, and that all will have been done. In terms of broader training, there were briefing sessions and so on given to more senior management to advise them. Remember, what is associated with this system is not just the mechanics of payment. What we're actually promoting through the system is a philosophy, a different outlook, which very much ties back to the FPT review position about compliance and better procurement arrangements and so on. So therefore, those awareness sessions to more senior officers are quite important, because they explain the philosophy and the objectives behind the introduction of the system. So that's kind of an ongoing process that will continue as each iterative aspect of the system is being delivered. I think there will be briefings given to senior officers and managers, and they'll be encouraged to do that. So training in the broader sense, operational training, yes, it's been done because it needed to be done for staff to get access. We obviously pick up on new people, who are coming in, and might need to do the system, might need to learn the system as well. So there's both on-the-job training and modules to complete, training modules to complete as well. So it's pretty good. That's why really there's no comment about this, is because we didn't pick up on any particular issues. And finally, sorry, Chair, if I'm going on a bit, goods received notes. Yes, goods received notes in a purchase to pay system assume a level of importance that previously hasn't necessarily existed. GRNs, as they're called, are always important in a purchasing system and process, but to some extent, that's the delivery notes you get in the box of whatever it is you're receiving. To some extent, we've just said, right, hang on to them, please keep them for audit purposes. But under a purchase to pay system, the GRN, the receipting process, is quite important. We make that point a couple of times in different positions in the report. So we would prefer, as auditors, we would prefer management to start having GRNs scanned and loaded onto the system. That is problematical for them at the moment, which is why it's not a recommendation, but we've tagged it. And effectively, in 3 years' time, when we do our next audit, we would expect to see much better progress made in terms of capturing GRNs and putting them onto the system as a permanent record. A GRN process and a sign off on a GRN, actually there's accountability for the payment now associated with that, which previously there wasn't. So management have said, we've kind of got some problems with this just at the minute. We're placing emphasis on them being retained locally, which, you know, we accept that you need to be doing that. That's good, well done. But we would like a bit more. We're asking them for more, but it's not a specific recommendation. But it will be a recommendation on the next audit report if it's not been progressed. In terms of coming back, the sort of part 2 to that question, coming back, as I say, in terms of what we're doing on this, I think the distinction between our recommendations and the actions under contemplation by management are to do with the 3 that we've made are specific things we've asked them to do that they had not intended to do. They've agreed to them and they've accepted them. The things that they said that they are doing, so this is, if you like, a work in progress, I don't think it's necessarily fair to tag those as audit recommendations, but we do need to be aware that they are achievements yet to be made by the service in the introduction of the system. So that's why we've kind of got it as a listing, as an addendum listing. Not every system we look at is in this position. Some systems are very stable and there's not that much development work going on. This one, because it's a new system and it's being progressed, and I think there's some development work still needed on it, we're able to say, well, okay, you know that these are important, and we're asking you to progress those over a longer period of time, then perhaps lends itself to a specific audit recommendation. So that, I hope that explains, Chair and Councillor Hagman, what my thinking is in terms of whether we make something a recommendation or whether we're noting it. And I hope that provides better clarity.
Thank you, Kevin. Katie, over to you though.
Yeah, no, that's useful. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Councillor Maitland. Jane, I think you're wanting.
Yeah, just a couple of things. It's about the issue with Mosaic. I mean, the implications of the omission of Mosaic transactions on the system. I'm assuming, Kevin, it's all still traceable. It's just not through this particular system. And I suppose I'm really looking for some assurance on that. The second issue is the payment of grants. And again, I don't know whether this is actually really totally relevant to this, but there is an annual pantomime that takes place over the payment of monies to the swimming pool in Kirkcudbright with a result of a long-standing service level agreement. And I'm just wondering whether the system can actually capture that requirement through an SLA. I'm not absolutely certain it can, but I'd like some assistance with that. The comment as well is simply that I like the format. It's much clearer.
Thanks, Jane. Kevin, you first, but I see Lindsay's got his hand up as well.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, in terms of, sorry, I'm trying to read my note. What was the first point, Chair? I apologise. So, still traceable. Mosaic, yes, got it. I couldn't read the word traceable. Yes, so what we have here with Mosaic is currently a feeder system. So it's a management system, a database. It's got lots of information about clients and stuff like that. It's very sensitive. Obviously, the information in it is fiercely protected. In an ideal world, our central system, our Integra system, the purchase-based system, will allow us to drill out to each of the subsystems, and so you look at it in one place. But with Mosaic, I think correctly, there's a recognition that actually you can't offer that more widely. If you want Mosaic information, you should be able to have a Mosaic access password. So effectively, we need to make a break. We need to break out of Integra and then log on to Mosaic. But the information is all there. It is all still traceable. It's all identifiable. It just means it's not a continuum, if you understand my meaning. It won't be seamless. And we need to recognize up front that is never an ambition to make Mosaic information available in Integra. In terms of Kirkcudbright swimming pool, yes, the new system, in fact, offers some interesting challenges in types of payments. And we've hinted at that in our report. where if you imagine a straightforward purchasing type arrangement, which should connect back to a purchase order and then to a contract, that is not always going to lend itself to every situation. So again, at the moment, we're kind of perhaps trying to shoehorn too much into the P2P sort of process. And one of the pieces of advice we're giving our colleagues in finance is to say to them, you need to start to graduate and separate out perhaps some aspects of types of payment, and perhaps look at the best way to achieve successful control of those, which is not necessarily tied back to a purchase decision. And it's that bit, it's the purchase decision that's going to cause us some problems, I think, in some cases. So as I say, it's part of the development stuff, and we're in dialogue with colleagues in finance about this, and they're happy to sort of take our observations and to look at solving that problem.
Thank you.
So just try to get my mic on. Lindsay, I think you had your hand up. Well, you want to come in with? Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I did, but Kevin, I think, addressed sort of both points very eloquently, really. Just for members' information, the major reason that Mosaic, in a sense, is set aside as a different sort of system is because it is very client focused, and the Integra system, although it can take into account things like job costing, that type. It's not a social work client-based system. But the other key point is that there's a lot of information within Mosaic itself is very, very sensitive, and so I think it's right and proper that that information is withheld from the general database shown within Integra. So. That said, as I say, the payment side of it, which obviously is purchase to pay, is responsible for, ultimately does go through the Integra purchase ledger, and in terms of all the various financial transactions, there's a very clear and visible audit trail around that. So hopefully that's a little bit more background to the uniqueness of the Mosaic and where it sits within the purchase to pay system. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, Lindsay. Jane, just to make sure that that's not spot on any further questions.
That's absolutely understood, and thank you for those explanations. And I'm assuming that in the next 2 years or so, perhaps the tweakings of grant payments and things will come forward, and we'll know that these all go through smoothly.
Lindsay, just come back in.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Yes, yeah, I think it's important for members to know that, and it is referred to in the report. Obviously, it is a new system. The last year has been a very transitional year. My staff have learned an awful lot about this sort of system and and how to sort of use it sort of properly. Obviously, with all the great training in the world, there's nothing as better than experience in actually using it. So there's a whole range of different items, and some of these have been picked up, sort of set different areas, and some of these have been picked up in Kevin's report that we need to sort of concentrate on, and again, grants in terms of sort of the third sector, how we interact with that in terms of is there a contract, is it a service level agreement, is it a grant in the traditional sense. These sort of things need to be sort of thought about probably a bit more detailed than we have at the moment, and that would inform us what part of the system to go through. Would it be the RSS, or would we go through the sort of traditional purchase ledger arm? But I'll assure you, yes, and just maybe just as a general point, we have worked very, very closely with Kevin, with Richard, in terms of the report, and we do recognise there were some weaknesses. I think anything new, there's bound to be, but we're very, very determined in terms of in terms of the action points to ensure that we follow those, and in terms of the other management intentions, we will be addressing these. We've actually started in some of those since the report itself has been produced.
Thanks, Lindsay. Don't see you coming back in, Jane, so I'm taking it you're okay with that. And further to add. Members, we've been asked to note and comment on the finalised internal audit report. I think we've done that. It's a matter of a decision. We've noted, we've commented, we've even asked questions. Thank you. Thanks very much. Item number 8. I think we're on scrutiny review, support to elected members. The purpose of this report is to consider the evidence, analysis and recommendations of the scrutiny review on support to elected members. So I think Liz and Vlad. So Liz, do you want to speak to this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. It was obviously at your meeting in April, the first version of this. And since then, we have updated the report to reflect the comments at the committee, which are detailed in Appendix 1, and also the report itself to reflect the discussions that have subsequently taken place with the Conservative group and the SNP group about the needs of political groups themselves. That has obviously complemented the individual survey returns that we'd had from a number of members. So hopefully the report reflects the conversations that we'd had at the last meeting and has simply been updated to reflect these later discussions. Thank you.
It does it for me, Liz. It absolutely does. So looks like somebody's maybe trying to come in. Sorry, it's a wee bit slow this thing. Councillor Stitt, Davy.
Cheers, Ian. Thanks very much. Just on the recommendations on page 122, recommendation 1 is very vague, and there seems to be no clear understanding of what this would mean or what the cost of the council would be. What does additional proportionate support for senior councillors and political groups available as required mean? We feel when the council is facing cuts, it is wrong to prioritise more support for councillors and not services delivered across the region. And if possible, Ian, after people had their say, I would like to make an amendment to one of the recommendations. Thanks.
You're always welcome to come back in there, Davy. So, Liz, do you want to answer that?
Yes, I mean, certainly you'll see from the evidence in Appendix 2 that there was a range of views from the political groups about what support should be available to the political groups. So the recommendation attempts to reflect that, and on the basis that it would be a discussion with the political groups themselves about what support they would need. Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you, Liz. No, like I say, I personally, I felt that in the interest of consensus, this ultimately gets reported to full council, and a decision will be made at that point, Davy. That's where I took it. And my intention would be to ask Councillor Maitland, the leader and the deputy leader, and probably leave it at that, and let's have a wider discussion, because we know Willie's already on this, one of the members already on this committee, to have a wider discussion in regards to how it should be presented at the full council, and try and get some kind of understanding what all political groups are thinking across the council in as far as getting some type of agreement. I would imagine amendments could be made to the full council. This is only a report that we are saying, right, this is the report that will pretty much go to full council, but the full council makes the decision. But certainly we're coming back in to pick up on your points later, Davy. So I'm sorry, I have to go back to the chat. This thing is really exceptional. Sorry, you've got yourself coming in. Yes, it's Katie, and then it's Councillor McKee. Councillor Hagman.
Thanks, Chair. Clearly, I'm taking my role of scrutiny to the next level, because I seem to be coming in with questions on every report today. But thanks, Liz, for this. I think it is really important that support is given to elected members in order for us to do the job, because let's face it, none of us have a specific qualification to be representing the council, other than the fact that we are all residents of Dumfries and Galloway and we want the very best. So I think it's appropriate that we do get some support, and that anybody who's considering standing for council next year feels confident that they will be able to do the job. And there's sort of reference made to that on page 127, and I think that's important. I think there is work to be done as a local authority in how we increase the representation of women and those maybe with a disability, and well, anybody from a BAME background would be. It's appropriate, our council should reflect the makeup of our society, and I don't believe at this point it doesn't. But I'm digressing onto another point. Looking at the recommendations, I think they're very full, and obviously they will be going to full council for approval and such like, and any other further comments. I really welcome the recommendation one that has a statement of individual member entitlement dealing with admin and clerical support. Now, I'm just wondering, jumping down to recommendation 4, if in fact there should be a statement of member entitlement to digital support within that. And we make reference to Modern Gov app, which is obviously a trademark app, but we don't actually make any reference to Zoom. And, you know, it came across loud and clear in all the workshops that members are frustrated that they can't use Zoom, but yet we've not specifically mentioned it. We've sort of gone round about it by saying other meeting platforms, but as far as I'm aware, there wasn't any other platforms discussed apart from Zoom. So could we maybe tighten up that recommendation and just add in that? And certainly the only other point I was going to make is in terms of the evidence coming back on page 126, it makes reference to individual needs assessment should be carried out to identify where additional technology or training is required. Could we add in additional adaptive technology? Because that was the point that I was making. And it shouldn't be where additional technology or training, it should be and training, because it shouldn't be one or other. And yeah, just certainly in terms of putting forward a statement of entitlement, I've never hidden the fact that I use adaptive technology. I've never hidden the fact that the adaptive technology that I use was developed for everybody. It wasn't just those with a learning disability. And I'm really happy to work on an individual basis to go through with officers exactly which programs, which technology software can actually help and why. So I've just put that as an offer to the officers. It's not appropriate that I go into detail in this current format that we're in today, but you know, I'm certainly really happy to feedback directly with officers on that, Liz, if anybody would like to take me up on that offer. Thanks.
Liz, it looks like Vlad's wanting in. So Vlad, you come in when you think it's appropriate, and then thank you. You're on mute, Vlad.
Sorry, Chair. I'll let Liz answer that, and if I can come in after that, if that's okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Liz.
Yes, certainly. If the committee is so minded, we'd be very happy to make these changes to the report before it goes to full council.
Thank you, Liz. Vlad?
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's just a point of clarification, really, that recommendation within page 122, which is there is to be additional proportionate support for senior councillors and political groups available as required. The political group element of it is just to purely clarify that it's not for political group business, is for council business, as it would be for any other member that we're providing admin support for, and that's what's been thrashed out at the workshops. So I'm just a point of clarification there, and I hope that Liz can back that up in terms of what was discussed.
Very much so, yes, and it was about that trying to make life more efficient and effective for you to work as a group of elected members. So it would be, for example, in the body of the report, we've talked about perhaps arranging for officers to attend or partner organisations to attend, and assisting the group as an entity with how it's conducting its business. So yeah, that's a very helpful point, Vlad, and we'll make that amendment too. Thank you.
Thank you. So I suppose we have to hear what Councillor McKee's got to say at the end as well, maybe feed into that. But I think, David, from my perspective, do want to take this forward as a consensus. Full council will make the decision, but and we'll come back to that. But it was recognised that we have the lowest level of support across Scotland when it comes to members. Councillor McKee, you're next.
Thanks, Chair. I quite despair at this paper, actually. What consideration is given by the political groups to the people that they guide to stand for election? They should be looking at their level of knowledge as well, and the knowledge that's available to them. They shouldn't be expecting to get elected and then get educated. And I think some of the things in here that are just over the top. It's a difficult issue, but if the officers could put a cost on what's in some of these papers to come to full council and give us an idea of exactly what we're talking about. But and with regards to female and BAME people, that's up to the political parties or individuals to stand themselves. There's no restriction on who can stand. And I would like to see actually that a right mixture was in there. Some of the lasses can't half talk, mind you, but there you go. That's one of those things. But no, I think there's an awful lot of stuff in there that doesn't need supplied by the council. That either the individuals themselves can supply it, or the political groups can supply it. Thanks, Chair.
I suppose just reflecting what you're saying there, David, as well, is that Jock, sorry, is this is probably going to be implemented for the next council. Might end up with 43 independent councillors. You never know. Elections are a funny thing, but
well,
anyways,
that might not be a bad thing. Says
you never know. I suppose Liz will give you a chance to start to give a wee answer to that if you can.
Again, certainly happy to reflect that any work that the council is doing would complement any activity by political groups themselves. I think, as you will know, that there is work going on at COSLA about generally trying to improve the representativeness of councils. And I suppose perhaps that's the distinction. It's about our council's activity compared with the political group activity that Councillor McKee refers to. So perhaps it would be helpful if we did make that distinction within the body of the report as we finalise it for full council. Thank you.
No, thanks, Liz. I think it is a good point to make.
Thanks very much. Aye, right.
Thank you, Joe. But I just think we did cover that a number of times, but maybe we need to make it absolutely clear. So it's not about the political colour, so to speak. It's about the political group makeup and supporting them for their duties as a councillor, as a member of the council. Right. So, if not any further speakers, like I say, I'm content. I think it's a really good report, actually. Still a lot to do in it in regards to getting the presentation ready for full council. I would like to say invite Councillor Maitland, the deputy leader and the leader, to have a discussion about this as well, so we can get some kind of understanding before we go in, because it is real terms it's probably going to apply. If it's sooner rather than later, great, but it's certainly for the next council. So it's probably David Stettles looking for Jock, unless you want to come in. As he might come on by accident.
Ian, I'll just come back in. The alteration, we're quite happy with 2.1 considered, but what we would like at 2.2, whether it's acceptable or not, is to agree to submit an amended report to full council on the 24th of June 2021. And if that is acceptable, that will delete the recommendation 1. It's up to members to decide and yourselves.
Sorry, David, I missed that. So it's 2.2. You're saying agree to
submit an amended report to full council at its meeting on the 24th of June 2021, which would delete recommendation 1. It's up to members. So it's just what we feel like.
Fair enough. So I would move we agree as per the recommendations contained within the report.
I will second, Davey.
Thank you. Thanks for that. So a mover and a seconder. I would move it as is without removing recommendation number 1 on page 122, if I've captured that correctly. Looking for a seconder if that's possible.
I'm happy to second you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Maitland. Thanks, Jane. So, as per discussed earlier, as part of the presentation, I'd start the committee that will go to a vote, so that'll be by roll call. Tracy, is that for yourself?
Perhaps, Chair, if I may, could I clarify that it's about the removal of the second bullet point in recommendation 1? So it's not the entire recommendation 1.
Oh, thanks, I just picked up as being the 4 bullet points, so thanks for that question.
I just wanted to clarify the intention of the voting before we move into that.
David, could you answer that? Was it just that second bullet point, Councillor State, or was it all 4?
We were going on about costing as well, Ian. There's no definition of cost, how much it was going to cost to the council.
Aye, so no, that's great. I think just we could. Was it the whole recommendation 1? So I know you could further, because I think I've said it in the past, Dave, and that's part of the discussion I'd like to have with the other group leaders. Is that so? We think it should be on a cost neutral basis, but obviously there'll be. So we're not going to employ further resourcing in regards to this, but we look for a reconfiguration within the workforce that the council already has. And I think that's potentially going to happen across the board in time anyways, but in particular that.
Katie's want to come in here.
Okay, Katie, thank you. Sorry, thanks for that. Councillor Hagman?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. I guess my question is, if we're looking at the second bullet point there, is there a question over the support for senior councillors? Just because I'm aware that senior councillors have additional business meetings with the directorates, etc., as they plan committees ahead and such things. And is it that support that we're looking to withdraw, or is it we don't want any additional support to that? Because obviously there was a wide range of different feedback given, and some directorates had more support given than others, I think possibly just due to the nature of business. And I'm just wondering at what aspect of that, and rather than maybe removing one of these recommendations, would it not be, if there's a worry about cost, then maybe we need to add in an additional recommendation on that? I don't know. I'm just looking for some clarity as to why this is not appropriate to be as a recommendation.
So David, I do want to put words in with, but I do feel it's probably just a political statement, which is absolutely acceptable as far as I'm concerned within the committee. And if the Labour group feel that they don't see they see it's potentially adding extra financial burden on the council, that's why it's being moved. I would accept that, and I think that's absolutely fine. But it's, David, it's maybe for yourself to answer that, but that's the feeling I would get.
No, we do feel the costing is one of the important things, Ian. Like, there's nothing in the recommendations or explaining what the cost would be, and we feel we're going through budget cuts, additional spend at this time, we should actually have it, what's it got to cost before we make a decision. Because if it goes to full council and it gets ratified there, we end up with a cost to fix it. There's no way we can combat it.
No, thank you, thanks. I mean, I would expect, Liz, this one's for you. I think I would expect to see within the report, through further discussions at the political group leaders as well as we go into this, to see some indication to whether there was a further cost to the council of this. And like I say, I think it should be done on a cost neutral basis. It can be a reconfiguration of staff, but I don't know if that appeases yourself or allows to deviate. I just should go to the vote. But Liz Alenza,
I'm happy just to come in for clarity before you move to the vote. So the normal process with a scrutiny review is that once full council has agreed the recommendations, then it's for the appropriate service to bring forward any report to its relevant committee about implementing these decisions. So I think the discussion that we've been having during the lifetime of this review is the point that there would be additional support for some of the groups and for some of the councillors, but the point is that it would be accommodated within our existing admin clerical complement. So colleagues and people in transformation who are responsible for the admin clerical support would be taking that into account, and should there be any implications, then they would bring a report forward about that. But I think you're correct that the focus has very much been on about the allocation of existing resources, but perhaps offering or consolidating some of the arrangements for senior councillors and political groups.
Dave, I'll put it in your hands. Do you want to go to the vote, or do you want to reconsider? And we'll just move on.
We'll just go to the vote, Ian. That'll do.
Good. Thank you. Thanks, Tracy. We'll just go to the vote then. If you go through the roll call, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So a motion is proposed by Councillor Davy Stick, seconded by Councillor David McKee, and that was to agree to submit an amended report to full council on the 24th of June 2021. And that incorporates the comments and the amendments that have been picked up as a group, but also in addition to that, the removal of recommendation 1 within the appendix. And the amendment is proposed by Councillor Ian Crothers, seconded by Councillor Jane Maitland, and that's to agree the recommendations in the report with the amendments that have been agreed as a group, but keeping in recommendation 1.
Yeah, okay. That's good.
Yeah. Chairman.
Amendment.
Vice Chair.
Sorry, amendment.
Councillor Bell,
Wonder if he's there. He was in earlier, I noticed.
yeah. Councillor Bell, no, he's not there.
He's away.
Right, okay. He did
Councillor
indicate Stephen. I think I
Is that
spoke over
done?
you, Tracy. Sorry.
Sorry, Councillor John Campbell,
Amendment.
Councillor Karen Crothers,
Amendment.
Councillor Katie Hagman,
Amendment.
Councillor David Inglis,
Amendment.
Malcolm's not present. Councillor McKee,
Motion.
Councillor Roney,
Amendment.
Councillor Stitt,
Motion.
Councillor Thompson,
Amendment.
Councillor Young,
Amendment.
the amendment carries 9 votes to 2. So the recommendation is to agree the recommendations as per the report with the amendments that have been picked up as part of a group.
Thank you very much for that, Tracy. So, I think that's it, isn't it? Sorry, it is. It is. Item no, sorry about this. I was too busy scribbling there. It absolutely is. Item number 10 is any other competent business.
You've missed
I know,
item 9.
9, I have, sorry, thank you. Sorry, just it's 4 screens, paperwork. So item number 9, scrutiny review programme, update report. You're absolutely right, because there's a particular point we want to pick up here in regards to PSP, isn't there? So, I'll just give me a wee second. So that was this report. It's to inform elected members of the planned scrutiny review activity over the remainder of 2021. Again, it's a good report as per usual. But I'm just looking for, it looks like it's Fraser or Vlad has got to talk to this. Fraser, on you go.
Good morning, thank you, Chair. Just a brief kind of note about this report. I think it notes a good practical plan to complete the outstanding scrutiny activity. I'd be welcoming members' thoughts on that, in addition to asking members to confirm if they are happy with the appendices about the scopes which are contained within the appendices for the outstanding reviews.
Apologies there, Fraser. Some barking dogs in the background. Apologies, members, for that. So, it looks good to me. Councillor McKee, I think you're coming in first then. Jock.
Thanks, Chair. There's just 3 slight amendments I'd like to make to Appendix 1, please. Outcome.
Done.
I'd like you to delete future plans and insert and how the PSP can support public transport provision across the region in future. On objectives of the review, delete considering future opportunities and insert understand the challenges facing the public network and D&G as we come out of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the third one, under add, consider how the PSP and Transport Scotland Act 2019 can support public transport provision in our region in the long term. Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Vlad, are you got to speak to them? I think you can maybe just show all the members just what's exactly what's there and what's being asked for. Thank you. We can then
Yeah,
compare.
if I could ask Tracy to upload it and share it so that all members can see the proposed wording of amendments. Could you maybe close in on it a bit, Tracy, if possible? Just zoom in. So these are the proposed changes which have just been read out. in essence, is that change to the outcome to read as highlighted there in yellow, to delete the consider future opportunities, and to further insert the two paragraphs underneath that highlighted in yellow.
Thank you, Vlad. So I'm just going to check to see if anybody's voting in, because this what I'm really keen to understand here is because there was specific individuals, members, asked for these. So I'm keen to hear, in particular, from the individuals that asked for this one here. Have they got any particular comments? But I see I've got Jane wanting to come in. Hopefully it's on this. And Katie, you've got a question, but hopefully what's on the screen should help answer that. But if I bring you in first, Jane, then I'll come at you after that, Katie.
No, thank you, Chairman. It was just to get it up in writing. And I'm not absolutely certain if it could be scrolled down, please, to understand why these changes are wanted. I think there is a...
Aye, so I wonder, so ultimately, I don't, Jock, I don't know if you can add value to what Jane's asking there. Obviously, this is a...
Certainly, Chair, I'll do my best. We want to, at outcome where we're deleting future plans, we want to insert how the PSP can support public transport provision across the region in the future. We're wanting to give you a positive destination in there, not just something flying in the air. And the objectives of the review was to delete considering future opportunities and insert understand the challenges facing the public network in Dumfries and Galloway as we come out of the COVID-19 pandemic. We need to try and identify objectives. And the third one is to add, consider how the PSP and Transport Scotland Act 2019 can support public transport provision in our region in the long term. It's to give us targets rather than just something in the air. If you consider future opportunities, unless somebody identifies future opportunities, nothing can happen. Not necessarily anything will happen. So we're just trying to identify something there. As in future plans, we've put in a future plan. Thanks, Chair.
Well, thank you very much. But Jane, that's for you, really.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I'm sort of slightly mystified as to why we should delete the consideration of future opportunities. I don't understand why that increases our understanding. This is a review. I'm quite happy with the insertions, the bottom two insertions, but I certainly don't see why we should delete consider future opportunities.
Yeah,
it's just I've inserted an opportunity there, but I've no objection if you want to keep considering future opportunities. That's fair enough. But we've put an opportunity. We've identified an opportunity, if you like. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Joe. I just feel like this stuff would come out through the review itself, so it's not about restricting any level of debate. But I think at the same time it could be appropriate that they actually be pointing direct at the same time. So this is what we would like to consider as a minimum. But obviously, there's wider opportunities there can be covered as well. So I'm agreeing with the Council meeting that additionality, yes, but to remove, I've got a bit more difficulty with. But Fiona, you'd like to come in before I bring Councillor Hagman in?
I think actually you've reached the point that I was going to suggest. I mean, I don't think it's either or. And in actual fact, in addition to the two specific recommendations that are up on the screen here, then my advice would be to retain the point about future opportunities and perhaps say consider all other future opportunities and report on them. So in actual fact that this review would be doing some horizon scanning as well.
Councillor Hagman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, I was looking for these to go up in the chat because I'm sort of working off two screens and it's quite hard to see. But the points have been made both by yourself, by Councillor Maitland and Fiona there. I think we would be remiss if we weren't considering future opportunities. But let's add in if there's aspects that are missing, by all means let's add in so that our scope is a wider, more far-reaching as we look to review this. But, you know, yeah, absolutely. We need, in my view, we need to consider the future opportunities based on the evidence that we receive within the review.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you. Thanks very much. Gina, you want to come back in?
Thanks, Ian. No, I think that's fine. As long as we don't delete future opportunities, I'm quite happy with what's up there. No problem.
Yeah, and slight amendment with as per what Fiona's outlined, I think. So what we need to get agreement for yourself, Jock, really, Councillor McKee. Are you happy? So we're no longer to take anything out, but we're more than happy to add the statements of fact or request even, sorry, that you've asked to be added.
Well, thanks, Chair. If you're willing to take what we're looking to add, that's fine. Obviously, there's more than one opportunity in the future, I would hope, and we've got to be ready to take them on board. Thank you.
No, thank you. No, those are good points to be added, I think. Excellent. Well, these things definitely will, as the review goes forward. These type of things. So we've been asked to agree the proposed scrutiny process and timelines as per paragraph 3.6, 3.10. Content to do that. Confirm or amend the previously agreed scopes for remaining reviews appendices 1 and 2. We've done that as well. If you could pass on your exact language, please, Fiona, to trace it, and that'll be embedded in the minute. Thank you very much. And agree to hold a workshop to consider amendments to the Council Scrutiny Handbook as per outlined in paragraph 3.13, and I think it clearly outlines there that it's up for review because of the time in particular. Excellent. I'll just double check in case else would want to come in. So I've maybe missed that. Jane, is that you want to come in?
Yes, it's just me. It's a tiny point, but I think we're a year out in the bottom of these timetables. We've got December 2020, March 2021. I think we just need to adjust that.
Right. Okay, for accuracy, picked up. Well spotted. Jane? Only Councillor Thompson that picks that stuff up. He must have left the meeting. Oh no, he's still here. Thanks so much, everybody. No, I haven't got any other business. We've got a workshop at 1:30. Should that be, Vlad, I'm speaking to you about this, I suppose, should that something that should be expedited, brought forward, if it's just for this particular committee membership? Or is that something we just leave to 1:30, let it run to 2:30?
No, there's been a general invite as well, so I would suggest that we stick to that time scale. Probably gives members a break as well prior to the RRR subcommittee.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Okay, catch you in the workshop. Good to see you all. Thanks very much.
Thanks.